Hey guys, J-Dub here at Dub's Customs again, and today we are starting yet another new project here at the shop. This is a 1951 Austin. It's a quirky, funny looking little car, but it is here at the shop today to get a 3.5 to 4 inch roof chop. Let's go around and have a better look at this, and I'll explain what I'm going to do and how I'm going to accomplish the task at hand, which is, well, chopping the roof. Somebody has already put a pretty good frame underneath this thing. It's heavily tubbed. It's going to have big fat boots, supposedly some type of hopped up small block, but that's beside the point. Let's get back on track and talk about this roof chop. I've done many chops in my life. This is going to be yet another, well, they're all challenges, I guess, so we'll be working through everything that, causes us a problem. We have to resolve and keep moving forward till sooner or later it's done. So most every roof chop, you have to segment the roof into 4 pieces. Now, this will be no different, but what I do have as a benefit and a way to make this job a little bit easier is a spare roof. So my plan is to start by cutting a big sunroof out of the top. Get rid of this material. It's pretty jeopardized and rusty up on the roof, where the other donor roof is in pretty good shape. So I'm going to kind of use a bit of both roofs to complete this job. I am going to have to cut it right here. That's why I want to get rid of all of the excess material, so I don't have to cut it all the way down. My plan is, when you chop something, as it comes down, well, because the A-pillar is on an angle, this whole roof section has to go forward, right? But I can't move this, so that means that I have to cut it here. And it also is not exactly vertical, it's on a bit of an angle, so that means when the roof comes down, it not only has to go forward, but it also has to come out, opening a bit of a gap here. So if I cut the whole roof, that means I'd have to put a strip down the whole thing, and I don't want to do that. So we'll be cutting it it radiuses around. Right when it flattens out here, I'm going to draw and cut that whole top piece out. Then we're going to do the full chop just with these outer pieces. When this comes forward, it's going to open up a bit of a gap here. Probably roughly in a 3.5 to 4, it's going to be about 1 inch to 1.5 inches that this roof will have to slide forward. Coming around back is very similar. When you drop this down, all this will mismatch. This is on even more of an angle than the A-pillar, so I know that when I drop this down, that 3.5 to 4 inches, the back section is going to have to come back even further than the front did. But again, the B-pillar has to stay right where it is now, so that means that I also have to cut it right here to slide it back, and I'm going to have to put a filler piece, probably in this case about 2 inches. One thing that I've always hated when I see some of these chops is when people chop it and they make the back window go to a point. I just think that just seems it's one misstep in my eyes. So before we chop this roof, I just rough and dirtied these lines on there, but we'll be cutting this radius out. So I want to take this, set it aside. Do my chop right through here. Then take this piece and re-sculpt it in. I might have to stretch along this outer lip here to close the radius a little bit to make it join back up, but it'll be a lot cleaner of a finish. The window will probably shorten up this way just a smidge, but I think that's going to look a lot better in the end. I want it to look factory, but chopped. Coming around to the back, we're going to keep the back window as big as we can. So I'm going to cut the window out before we chop the top, set it aside as well. Chop it and then come back and start setting it in place and making it all fit. What I'm kind of hoping to do is, because if I cut this one out really tight and then I cut the window out of the donor roof further out, I'm gonna have a little bit of extra material because just like the front, this isn't exactly vertical. And when you go and chop it down, I'm gonna also have to slide it out. So there's gonna be a little wedge having to be put in here as well. So it's a lot of work, because after I go around and I do all of that, I am going to take the donor roof and cut as much of the top out as I possibly can, so I can lay it over top and have it lay past where I cut this roof. So if I cut this roof way in here, and I cut the other roof way out here, it will overlap it all. Then all I have to do is trace around the outside and sculpt it into place. So last steps will be putting the back window back in, putting these sections in on both sides, and then coming back around to the doors. These frames, when you chop it, like, you know, you chop this, yes, it's gonna go straight down, it'll line up pretty darn good. But this will also have to be slid forward. So you also have to cut right here. And it'll be opened up the same width as this up here, that 1.5-inch-ish. But I am lucky in this case that I have spare upper doors. So I'm going to, well, we can attack this one of two ways. Well, maybe only one way. Yeah, only one way. I was just going to suggest a second way, but it's not looking like it's possible. I'm noticing that this is a little wider than this. I thought what I could do is if I cut this and give myself a little extra, I can just put this in here. But I can see this here is longer than that. These parts here are off of a 4-door. Obviously, we've got a 2-door here. So what I will be able to do though is just take a little bit of this material because it's roughly the same shape, and I'll put it in here where I need it. And I'll do the same for this piece right here to the donor roof, put a little slug in there, whatever I end up needing. So it's definitely to my benefit that a spare roof came with this. So it's gonna make it a lot easier in the end. It's a lot of work, it's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm gonna bring you guys along through the whole thing, and we're gonna kind of just talk it out. And in the end, one thing I know for sure, because I can see it here, and if I can see it here, I know it is gonna turn out perfect. It'll be just like factory. We'll polish the welds out, and if I do my final weld here, I can hammer weld it all out, take any of the distortion out. One thing that I'm still kind of working through in my mind, because you know anytime that you weld something, you get distortion, number one, and the reason you get distortion is because of the shrinkage. So I'm thinking if I put a weld all the way along here and it shrinks a little bit, it might affect my door gap. Yes, I've got cross bracing and everything all tacked in here, and I've got it pretty strong. I'm gonna put one more piece across here to stop it, but what I'm thinking is when I do chop the roof that little bit, should I open it up just a little bit? Right now I've got 1/8 gap. Should I open that up to a 1/4-inch gap? Because I know when I weld this, it's gonna shrink. It's definitely not gonna open up, I know that for sure. I feel like in my mind, with my experience, it's gonna shrink on me, and then I'm gonna have a tight gap here. Like right now, this door is sagging a little bit. It probably would have, if I lined it up properly, 3/16 gap, but I really think that by the time I do this little weld right here, and I get that shrinkage, and it pulls, you know, even with my bracing in here, it's gonna end up coming in on me. If I plan this out properly, and when I cut this here, if I take my Porta Power and I just open it up a little bit and watch this door, then put this bar in here to hold it. And then just, I'm okay if it shrinks just a little bit. You know, it's always a guessing game, but I think it's something that I need to be thinking about at this stage, so by the time I get there, I can have a solid plan. We have one 1951 convertible Austin. So with a job like this, you really gotta know where you've been, where you're going, and where you're at. Obviously, you can see we've cut it into quite a few different pieces. I've got to knock these little stubs off, and then we'll start reassembling things, getting it all squared up, and see what it's looking like. And then we'll make the decision, do we need to go a little bit more? So I think I will tackle the doors second, because I can just swing them out of the way. So if I can get all of these little nubs cut off, then we can start putting these pieces back on. If you can see right here, this is a very important line for me, because I'll know when I put this top half back on, I can put a straight edge along this line and it should match the top section. That'll know if I'm leaning in or out too far, because I still have to cut each one of the pieces that I've removed down the center. So there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces all together, and then I need to weld everything back into one. So a lot of work when you're chopping something, but the end result's definitely worth it. Well, the grinder and the reciprocating saw made quick work of chopping this roof off. Now it's up to me to put it all back together. I feel pretty good about it. When we start putting things back together, you're going to see that absolutely nothing will match back up. I don't really like what I see on that cut in particular. It's on a little bit of an angle, but because I use tape, the top should be on that same angle. So when I drop it down, it should still butt up fairly close. I'm going to have a lot of fitting to do in these areas, but I have lots of reference marks so I can make sure everything is dropping down at the same amount. So that's kind of step one there. I like it. So I've started putting all the pieces back on the 51 Austin, and as you can see, we're having to shuffle the parts around a little bit, leaving us with these gaps. By the time I'm done, I'll have this roof chopped in 1, 2, 3, 6 pieces, 6 big pieces and a few small pieces. Then we've got to go up and around the door. Right now, it's a 3-inch chop. It looks pretty good. I don't think I'm going to go any more than that. I've got to start fitting the back piece, but all in all, everything's going good. My plan for the top is, because I have the other roof skin, I'm going to be cutting it out here and just draping it over the top. So even when I go and put these pieces back in, I don't need to weld them all the way up, because I'll be cutting some of this material off at a later date. But there's the first glimpses of the chop so far. Pretty happy with it. Let's keep going. Our 51 Austin's chop is really starting to come along. I'm just working on all of the little filler pieces that we need to put in. As you can see, even though we had a donor roof, this is a 2-door. The donor roof was a 4-door. So it really doesn't quite match. It's close. It's better than starting with nothing, I guess. But you can see I've had to add a little sliver in here, and but putting Humpty Dumpty back together again. This side's about the same. Everything is looking pretty good. I'm happy with the progress today. Tomorrow is going to be a good day, because we're going to be able to finish off these little strips, and then I'm going to cut the roof off of the donor. All I need is the skin, but unfortunately the back section, you can see, is pretty toasty. So I'm gonna have to slice it across here, unfortunately. I wish I could have used the whole roof, but it is what it is. That's why when I chopped the big window out of the top, I made sure I left the back section. So coming around the back, I've got these butted up. They're not quite matching yet. I need to clean all the paint off and get it all tacked. Everything back here is looking good. We've had to open up, you know, about 3/4 of an inch. Tomorrow I'm gonna be welding the window back in. Probably take about an inch or so out of the window. It's already small enough in my eyes, but we'll knock it down just a little bit so it fits in here better. If you leave it too tall, it could stick up here too high and have like a dog leg. So if I shorten it down, it gives me a little bit more room to roll into it, and it'll be just a better finish. This side, just as good. Everything's just tacked. I'll just slowly go around and tack it and grind all the nubs down and put some more tacks in it after that cools. I'm just not gonna get in a hurry. I got lots of other work to do, so I'll just keep coming back to this, and just a little bit at a time. That's gonna keep the distortion down. But you can see everything's flowing nice like it should be. You know, your eyes are definitely the key here. Everything flows pretty good. After all the welding's done, I'll do a little bit of fine tuning on this drip rail, and I'll make it absolutely perfect. But even here, trying to keep in mind that I don't want it to dogleg. I don't want much of an angle change, if any. So I'm watching that when I was doing my cut, and once it started coming down at the right angle and it just flowed, I knew I was right on the mark. So it's tacked. All I've got to do is clean the paint off here as well. Sorry, it's not tacked. I just got to clean the paint off and tack it, and then we're going to be ready to move on. I want to get that window frame in there because that's a lot of structure. Once I put that in there, it's going to be a lot harder for this roof to distort. So that's got to happen first. A good plan makes for an excellent execution. Same with this one. See how that drip rail just flows around? You know, I'm really trying to see that. The piece where it flows into the piece that I had to make is like as close to perfect as it can be. So I've gone around just a couple of times just to really lock it in so it's not going to move anywhere. And one thing I want to show you guys, which is very important to me, I hope it will be important to you as well, is you see how I'm trying to avoid any sheet metal touches as I'm grinding down my tacks. Like every once in a while, because of human error, you know, you might touch a tiny little tad, but you can see I'm concentrating on just grinding down the weld itself. I never want to touch the sheet metal. Only one time at the very end will I ever purposely come off of this weld and touch the sheet metal, and that is just to do my final blend. I'm knocking all of these spot welds down as close to the sheet metal height as possible without gouging in. And as you can see, as I go around and around and I spot weld and just, you know, keep putting spots every half inch, and then in between that, slowly you start to have one solid weld. As you come over here, so right here there was some lead, and there's like a seam right here and right here. So I'm kind of doing that at the end. But you can see right here where I've got weld and then there's nothing. I know that I still have to weld in between there. There's still a cut there. So by the time I'm done through this area, it'll be one consistent weld like this side is. It's the same over here. Just don't touch the sheet metal. You know, I'm pretty happy with how it flows. Like I might have to just hammer and dolly it maybe just a little bit, but man, I couldn't ask for a better fitment. Same here, just, you know, slowly I've come around, I've finished that off. You can see where there's still a lot more welding that needs to be done. But again, no grind marks over here, none over here. I'm not putting my grinder out on the sheet metal. You know, I'm taking my time and putting a lot of pride into this job. So in the end, it's gonna be the best that it can be. But remember, don't touch the sheet metal. It is so thin that one little whoops and you could be right through, and then you're in a world of hurt. So practice your skill. Grind accurately. Grind accurately. accurately? Sure. Do that and you'll be just fine. So remember how mismatched this A-pillar was? You can see with a little bit of time and some attention, I've got it all lined up really, really well. But I will not go any further with the welding until I bring out the grinder and I knock all of these tacks down just above the thickness of the sheet metal. And that is because if you go and put another tack right beside this tack, which is 3 times the thickness of the sheet metal, it won't penetrate through fast enough. So you've got to knock all these down and then put more spot welds, then knock those down and then put more down. And the reason is I want that to penetrate all the way through to the backside to leave myself some reinforcement. When I go and polish this out, I still want this weld to be thicker than the sheet metal on either side. But again, that same principle that we talked about earlier, I never touch the sheet metal until the very end. I want to bring everything down as close as I can to the height of the sheet metal, and then I'll take a brand new flapper and I'll just dust it off. It'll be like a machine finish and it'll look absolutely amazing. The other reason you don't want to weld too fast on these is because if I welded right across that, I'll end up with a big dip. So I might end up with a whisker of a dip, but if I go slow, it'll definitely be a lot less. And really you want this to be sunk in just a hair when you put your skim of Bondo over it anyway, but I still try to make things as perfect as possible. So now that we've got everything tacked together, I got that piece in, I'm going to start fitting the roof cap and then finally do the back window. And the reason why I'm not going to do the back window first is because I've left this kind of open, so when the roof comes across, I can raise these up and line it all up to my cut that's going to be across there, and then whatever this is sitting at, then I'll put the window in after that. If I lock the window in here, I can't, like, as you lift this up, this gap's got to open, or if it needs to go down, it's got to close. So I want to leave that option open because I've got that weld to do right there. It's going to be the nastiest one of them all. If the other donor roof would have been perfect, obviously I could have came all the way down to here and it would have been a higher quality job, but I'm working with what I got and I'm still going to make it a very high quality chop, and in the end you guys would be surprised on how factory everything looks. But I'm going to get back to work. I just wanted to bring you guys in and kind of show you where I was at and my reasoning on what I'm doing. Really. There's a lot of different ways to do every different style of chop. This is just the way that I'm working through all the different little issues that I'm running into. On this chop, you guys might have done it, you know, completely different. Maybe write some comments if you would have done it a little bit different, you know? So I've got the roof skin on, and you can see how unfortunate it's going to be that we didn't have the full roof skin. I'm really going to have to really spend some attention back here to make sure that that flows really nice. Right now it's sagging right there. I need to lift it all up, but I'm going to take the skin off. There's a bit of a dent there. There's a dent on the other side, but you can see that it is going to be pretty smooth, but the work is going to be right there to make it right. The front flows pretty good. It's nice having this roof cap, so I'm going to be able to just trace along here, do my final cut, set it into place, and then probably spend just as long as it takes to do all of that right back here to make this right, because I've only got one shot at pushing this all up and getting it right before I stitch it. And if I didn't push it up enough as I weld it and it shrinks, it drops a little bit and it's going to have a little whoop-de-whoop in it. So I'm going to pay some pretty good attention to that, but I'll get it. So I've got the skin clamped on there and I'm fighting this back section a little bit like I knew I would. It's getting pretty close. Still has a little bit of a dip right here, and I'm starting to think it's because this is the 4-door roof. So I know I'm gonna fight that. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to push it up a little further than what I think it needs, because I know when I do a weld across here and then the 2 welds down the center here, it's all gonna shrink, and when it shrinks, it's gonna drop. So I'm trying to push up a little extra material because I know it's gonna come down a little bit. How much is what I don't know. So I'm just using my experience and my best judgment to make the call. I'm going to leave this strip out until the last minute because I feel like I'm gonna weld that first, and then this still gives me a little bit of adjustment. And I think before I weld that, I'm gonna come and I will put the back window in. So I get that little bit of adjustment, lock it in with the back window, then do those welds. And I'm thinking what I'm gonna end up doing is, if I tack both sides of this strip and I start welding it, you got 2 times the shrinkage. If I just tack this side a couple of tacks and I weld this side, let it go, let it spring free, so then I've taken care of the distortion on one side, then I've only got to deal with distortion as I weld this side. So that's kind of my thoughts right now, but it looks pretty good. I don't know what you guys think, but I'm pretty happy with it. My weld's gonna be in a perfect spot, so I'll be able to put a dolly underneath here and kind of just smooth everything out. Everything's pre-thought out and is going to plan. Got my A-pillars looking sweet. Everything's looking good there now. It's a lot of work doing a roof chop, but the end results are pretty awesome in my mind. You know, everybody likes something a little bit different, but they all look better chopped. So I've got the roof cap back off and my lines drawn. I just wanted to show you one thing that I do, is I always leave myself these little tabs for 2 different reasons. One, so when I put my part back on, it just doesn't fall through the hole. And the other reason is I can use a self-tapper and actually screw the roof cap on, or the quarter panel on, or whatever I'm working on. I usually will always have a few of these going around so I can use them to my advantage. I'm gonna cut this out now, same with this corner right here. This is so that corner won't drop through when I put the skin back on. It's gonna be easy to line it up with this extra step. So I'm gonna grab the grinder. We're gonna cut out just the inside of the line so we can start fitting the roof cap. So here's a look after I've done my trimming. I left my corner tabs, another tab, center tab, just so I'm gonna have an easier time placing the roof, sliding it around. And in between the tabs, I can push it down, line it up, and tack it. Then I'll come back over with the zip cut and I'll cut the tab off, slide it down, and tack it as well. So we're gonna start fitting the roof here next. I've left the back a little bit long just so I can kind of still do my finessing back there, but I think I've got it dialed in now. I've kind of seen what the roof does when you push it up, and you know, I got an idea. I've got an understanding is what I'm trying to tell you. I'm gonna put the cap on, we're gonna start tacking it into place and be one step closer to finishing this job. But we're really gonna get that first really good look without the clamps of the roof chop. You won't get the real good vision of the roof chop until we get the top part of the door done, because it'll make the window look smaller, which will make it look more chopped. So we're getting there though. Just give me a little bit more time. So as you can see, I'm starting to get close with the back section here. I'm just slowly spot welding it up. I'm gonna leave that section till the very, very end, because I figure this is gonna shrink, this is gonna shrink. Just let that do its thing, and then I will put that strip in there. If everything stays like it is now, I'll be happy. but I know it won't. I'll be dealing with a lot of shrinkage. I'm just hoping that right in here, it doesn't sink down. So I'm gonna constantly be fighting to keep it pushed up. I really did contemplate making a new section and doing my weld here and here, but so far so good. As long as I don't get too antsy and start welding too fast, I feel like I can keep control of the distortion, and this job is going to turn out absolutely excellent. After I'm done the welding here, I've got to fill that in and finish up and around both doors, and I'll be done. Now that I've got the back window all completely welded and the sliver that I had to weld up the back of the roof, it's looking really good. There's lots of cleanup to be done here. I still have to go around and work down the rest of the weld, but I'm turning my attention over to the top of the doors. Now, I do have a secondary upper section of the door for an Austin, but it's nowhere near the same. This is 4-door, this is the 2-door off the car. You can kind of see that, you know, it's pretty thick. And the 2-door, let's just get up top here. You can see it's quite a bit, well, it doesn't really show it in the camera, but it's quite a bit narrower. So I'm trying to make up my mind. You can see also that the door itself is a lot shorter, like from front to back. So I'm trying to make a decision on where to make my cut. I always look at, you can see where it gets thin to fat. Now I know I don't want to do a cut here because when I go and put my little piece in here, it'll be lots of mismatch. Same with here. I got to try to find the most consistent in the center, right where the arc is centered out. So I'll be cutting somewhere right in here, opening it up about the same. That 2 inches that I had to do there is gonna have to come down in the door as well. So I'm just pre-planning to make sure that I cut in the right spot. I wanna get these upper doors on because that's when you really start to see the full vision of the chop. Like you can see the back window's smaller, but then it's quite large here. As soon as you put that section in, it really makes the roof look a lot lower. So I've got that to do today, and I'd like to get those pieces in as well. So we got lots to do. Let's get started. I've made some pretty good progress. As you can see, I've got the top portion of the door in, and I've tacked in the back section of the back window, showing the importance of having a good plan. And you see how much cleaner that is? Yeah, I've got to make a little bit of a patch piece for right there, but I was able to come around and match these angles nicely. Everything looks excellent there. Up here, it's only okay. I've got my piece tacked in there. This is the piece from the center section of the 2-door, and you can see the differences. I almost would have been better off just starting from scratch, but I pretty much just used the front piece, which fit, you know, kind of okay-ish. Actually, not all that great. I'm gonna end up cutting this piece out of the way, making a new section, come down here, and by the time I'm done, mark my words, it will be mint. Now that I've got all the pieces welded back in on our 51 Austin, we're getting very close to being done this 3-inch chop. I've got all the welds knocked down just above the base metal, and I'm ready to do my final polishing to remove them so it looks like one piece again. Everything is turning out really well. I've got a couple little things that I still need to get in and fix, but I want to knock out the majority of the welding. So you can see that everything is back in place, got the top of the door on there, and now it's time to come back around and clean all this off. I mentioned before that I knock this down just above the base metal, and what I do to do that is use an old flapper disc. An old flapper disc is a lot harder, right? It doesn't give so much, so I'm able to precisely knock the weld down without hitting the base metals. Now that I'm at this stage is the only time that I will come over here and I'll just lightly touch each side as I take this down. But I will switch to a brand new flapper disc. A brand new disc, it's a lot softer. You wouldn't think it is, but it is. It gives a little bit. So it will kind of just roll and blend everything out. So I'm gonna put this on the grinder. I'm gonna start going around and I'm gonna finish this off I'm pretty happy with everything. The little bits of work that I have left to do is gonna be like these little things here, where I gotta come in and I've got to line this back up and just finish up the little things. But I just feel like I wanna get past the last little bit of grinding, any little bit of hammer and dolly work to knock out any little bits of dents. And then I'll come back around and finish the little things, and I can make the phone call and send this car home. So after quite a few hours, we're finally done with our 51 Austin chop. There was a lot of care and attention, but you can see the results speak for themselves. You guys are gonna wanna like, follow, and subscribe like always, and make sure you follow along for what we've got coming down the pipe next. Like always, guys, be safe out there.